Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, leading publishers of books, directories, educational guides and magazines aimed at schools in the UK and beyond. Enjoy the podcast. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. Once again, the late show. It's Monday evening, and thank you very much for joining us tonight for this important show all around teachers on strike. We're going to be talking about why teachers are striking. We're going to be discussing whether you think that teachers should strike or not. Of course, you may know, if you're listening to this live, you probably will know that 90% of the members of the NEU who were able to vote within the NEU for strike action did vote for strike action, and they passed the threshold, albeit marginally, to be able to legally go on strike. For those people listening to this as a podcast, and we did have 500 people in Mexico download Teachers Talk Radio in the last 30 days. So we've got a growing audience in South America. So in case our South American audience don't know, many teachers and schools in the UK will close due to strike action over the next few months. It'll be, I think it's over 4 days that strike action will take place. In terms of why these strikes are happening, well, most media outlets would report that it is about pay. And most teachers in England and Wales had a 5% pay rise in 2022. In Northern Ireland, many teachers were offered 3.2% increases for the last school year. But unions are saying, and many teachers are saying, that with the cost of living going up, food, fuel, and so on, that actually those pay rises are now pretty much null and void, that they aren't enough. Many people's wages aren't increasing by the same amount as inflation. So many people are struggling to pay for things. And that's this phrase, the cost of living crisis. That's where it's all sort of come to a head with. Now, in Scotland, unions asked for a 10% increase in wages, but the government have said that that's not affordable. The current offer in Scotland is a 5% rise up to 6.85%, for the lowest paid staff. Now, in England and Wales, the NEU has 300,000 members, and they passed a vote where they passed the 50% mark, and 90% of those voting were in favour of strike action. And they said that this was sending a, quote, strong message to the government. Now, one of the questions that people have asked is, will schools actually close because of strike action? Well, many will. Some, I'm sure, won't, but many will. Some may resort to online lessons. I'm sure there may be a mixture of hybrid things going on, but some will inevitably close. Now, what I want to do on this show, I want to think about a number of questions, and I've got a number of guests joining me as we move through the show this evening to discuss this. And I want to really welcome any teacher voices out there. This is Teachers Talk Radio. So if you're a teacher and you have a view on this, whether it is 100% for strike action or not, it would be brilliant to hear from you to discuss it. We'd love to hear your sort of opinion on this, especially I'm sure those people listening back to it as a podcast will benefit as well from hearing as wide a range of views as possible. I did a poll on my social media the other week where I asked people about strike action. I asked teachers what they, what I guess,
I asked them why they will leave, why those teachers who wanted to leave, and only 5% said pay outright. Around 30% said both pay and workload, and it was around, I think, 40% who said workload. So one of my questions to everyone tonight is, are the unions focusing on the wrong thing? Or are they right to focus on what they are? My question would be, and this is me throwing it out as a personal question, if only 52, 53% of teachers in the NEU are voting, if less than that are putting through a vote in the other unions, then is that because of the issue? I'm not saying, by the way, that pay isn't an issue. I'm not at all suggesting that. But we're talking about why go on strike? That's what I'm sort of focusing on here. Is pay the right thing to go on strike for? Because I wonder, and I'm putting this question out there to everyone listening, I wonder if the strike action was, we demand 1 PPA a day. So instead of pay or a pay rise, we demand 1 PPA a day. We demand changes to policies, actual tangible changes to policies that would reduce workload. We demand, I don't know what it would be, whatever a teacher would think that would help them reduce their workload. But my point would be, would it have been, would you have got a higher response from teachers if you'd have focused on the issue of workload? And I do wonder that. I don't know the answer to it. I'm only really focusing on the poll that the polls that I've seen about what bothers teachers the most, about why they leave the profession. Workload always comes out way above anything else. Some of the comments on that did point out to me that pay would an increase in pay would reduce workload. I don't understand that. I want someone to come on and sort of explain that to me. Maybe I've got a number of guests tonight who are hopefully going to be coming along. I'll tell you who I've got, and this was sort of, because this was very Teachers Talk Radio, very in the moment. These guests sort of agreed to come on in the last 24 hours. I've got Callum. Callum is a member of the NEU. He works for the NEU. And he is a former member of SLT, teacher. He's going to be coming on to hopefully share his thoughts on this. And maybe he can answer that question when it comes to the NEU, what their sort of position is, and whether they think this strike action can be a success. Because that would be my next question, really, is, do we think that this strike action will prove successful? And what is success? Because the way I'm sort of looking at it from here is that if we can't improve recruitment and retention, now pay may help with the recruitment. It may. But I think the bigger issue is retention, because if we can't crack that, then the UK is still going to have huge issues, because as soon as someone gets a job, they're going to be looking for jobs internationally, or they're going to be looking for jobs elsewhere if the workload is too high. People would even consider taking a pay drop if they felt that they didn't have to work in a toxic environment, in a place where the workload is excessive, where the politics is silly, where all of these different issues that have plagued education for decades now, really, but certainly in the last more recent times become much more prevalent. Unless we can crack retention, I don't know how much the pay is going to make a difference to retention. According to that poll I put out, and it wasn't scientific, it sort of indicated that it might not. And as I say, I'm welcome to anyone to sort of come on and tell me what they think. By the way, just so everyone knows what to do here, if you want to speak on this show, on this space, then you can do. It's very easy. just tap the little symbol on the bottom left-hand side, the blue microphone icon. If you want to contribute your opinion on anything I'm saying, it would be fantastic to hear from you. Any of the thoughts I'm sort of putting out there. But one of my key questions, if you're just joining us, and many people are, and thank you very much for spending a bit of time with us this evening. One of the key questions is, number one, should teachers strike? Number two, can teacher strikes be successful? And then my next question is, what is success? Is success as simple as we get the profession gets another pay rise, a more substantial pay rise? Is that it, so to speak? Because in my head, even if that happens, which is by no means, certainly not guaranteed. I don't know how likely it is. I'm not an expert on these matters, but just based on the other strikes going on and the other sort of pressures around, I'm not certain that those pay rises will be granted, certainly at the rate being asked for, but even a compromise settlement. But let's say they are, what's going to happen after that? Is that going to solve? Is that genuinely going to solve the issues in the profession? Is that the key reason to strike in the profession? Is that the key issue as to why the profession in the United Kingdom is in a mess? I don't know. Certainly it concerns me that there isn't maybe more conversation within the media and even within the profession itself around what do we need to do to keep teachers in the classroom. I've got my first caller in, which is very, very exciting. Mr. B, who's a regular listener at Teachers Talk Radio. So that's lovely. Mr. B, how are you this evening?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, good, thank you. Looking forward to getting some views on this tonight, definitely.
Well, do you want to firstly just quickly introduce yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a teacher, head of department for PSHE and RE in a school in Kent. And yeah, the strike conversation has sparked a lot of discussion at school this last week. People kind of being hesitant, people not. People a lot more confident in doing so. I think the main thing that I just wanted to add to, when we're just kind of putting thoughts out there initially, is that as much as it is about the pay, the NEU in particular, it's for a fully funded pay increase. I think we forget that, yes, the 5% that we've been offered, whether you think that is good or bad, that's had to come almost entirely out of existing school budgets.
From school budgets.
You see anecdotally on Twitter, heads talking about being in deficit and all that. So there is an argument there as to whether it's right to strike about the two. Are we going to get as much public support when asking for an increase in pay and it being fully funded? But I think that funding element of it is something really important. I don't know how I will be striking, but I don't know how I'd feel about striking for a pay rise that wasn't funded if we do get one. So yeah, that distinction there, that we're out there to get this properly funded from the government after what has been a long time of underfunding in the sector, I think that's quite an important thing just to say.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
I'm interested to know, because you said there was discussions on your staff and stuff. I mean, what's the general chat been? Has it been generally very sort of, yes, let's strike?
I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because you tend to be in departments and surround yourself with like-minded people. There's a silent majority, I would say. I'd say a lot of people are quite hesitant to talk about it. Our head has been very open and has not put any pressure on anyone either way, and has communicated that he does support strike action. So it's not. I don't think it's a workplace fear, as it were. I think it's more of a society. What are people going to think of teachers going out on strike? A couple of people have said, I think I earn an honest wage for an honest day's work. The PE teachers have said that, obviously. But some people, like myself, have said no. Look at the numbers over the last 10 years. We've decreased 20% in terms of how much we're valued and how much we're. I think it was 1.6% the average teacher's salary was 10 years ago, compared 1.6 times the national average. Now we're at 1.4, and you could look at that and say that's still 1.4 the national average. That can't be moaned at, which I do also think is true. But it's a devaluation, and where's that trajectory take us if we don't do anything?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you heard my sort of preamble a minute ago, but one of my sort of key questions in the intro was around if the strike action goes ahead and if it's successful, what impact do you think it's going to have if it is successful on recruitment and retention? Do you think that if the strike action leads to some sort of pay increase, what impact's that going to have? I'm being a little bit cynical here, I think. But
yeah, no, it's difficult to tell, and if you base, whenever you base a decision on the consequence, we don't live in the future. It's very difficult. I think I look at friends, similar age, who are earning my salary and more in the private sector, in the city, things like that. For I don't know the ins and outs of everyone's day, but in discussions, what seems like far less workload or a different type of workload. And I just think there's no reason why there's no surprise, why graduates aren't going into teaching when you can go into the private sector, earn X amount of money, for a private company or an HR or something like that. So I don't think is going to be a silver bullet, particularly to retention. I think it might help a bit more with recruitment, but it's definitely a factor. I think the 8.9% that ECTs were offered to start on M1, that is a substantial increase. But if that isn't reflected up the pay scale, why would you go into teaching, work long, difficult hours in a highly skilled, challenging job when you could earn more sat at a desk?
I agree. I mean, certainly, I'm not suggesting that that it won't make any difference, but I just wonder whether, based on, I told you I did this poll, it had about 7,000 votes. So even though it was non-scientific, a lot of people voted on it, and it was pretty resounding. Only 5% said that they would consider leaving the profession because of pay. Something like 30-40% talked about workload. So my point would be is, when I think about it in my head, I just don't know if, even if the strike action is successful, it's going to lead to what we want, which is better working conditions for teachers. Whether that can actually be delivered through this sort of thing, I don't know. Whether you can sort of threaten strike action over workload, I'm sure you can. And I'm sure there will be, I mentioned earlier in the show about a PPA a day. This idea that time is the real currency for teachers. That's not to say that pay isn't important. Of course it's important. It's the fundamental staple of being in a job. I mean, of course it is, but I don't know. I'm not convinced personally that this is going to get the sort of big positive results that we'd maybe want to see for such radical action. I don't know. I hope I'm wrong. I'll bring in some other callers. Alex, I'm guessing you're going to disagree with me, but we will soon find out. Good evening.
Hi, evening, Sam. I think like your point about workload and the 1 PPA a day is bang on, isn't it? Like having that one in the course of a day really makes the whole shape of your work for that day much better. You can plan your lessons and breathe in a much better way. But The strike to me is not only about addressing the recruitment and retention crisis. Like that's certainly a point that we would make,
Yeah,
and it would be
yeah.
good if it could deal with that. But it is also like about our lives. Like I sometimes feel that that's missing from these discussions, the sense that we like actually matter, because we're a self-sacrificial bunch, aren't we, teachers? That's kind of why we go into the job, is we want to help other people, but we also matter. You know, like someone that's been in the profession since 2010 and has had real terms pay cuts almost every year since then. That's not good, right? They're doing like long hours every week, an emotionally intense job. And I think the NEU calculators, the average teacher's lost something like 60 grand cumulatively over that time period, compared to if they'd had parity with the 2010 pay. And that kind of matters, you know. Even if we were to just address that with the strike, that would be a significant achievement. Even if we're saying that workload is the kind of main contributor to the recruitment and retention stuff.
Let me ask you a question, Alex, and I'm going to ask this to Michelle as well in a moment. Michelle being an NEU Joint District Secretary. So, Michelle, I'm sure will have a say on this as well. But, Alex, I wanted to ask you, why do you think the turnout for the NEU vote and the other unions' votes was struggling to get the 50%? Why is that?
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer. I mean, there are some factors that might lead into this, like the postal strikes and things like that. It could be the fact that there's not been a strike for a long time in the sector, and so people just aren't used to postal ballots and things like that. Obviously, also the NEU is massive. There's hundreds of thousands of members, and so just logistically, it's quite a big challenge to get people to turn out for that kind of thing.
Yeah, but you take my point that if and this is my sort of point, if if people, I'm not suggesting this is the case, I'm asking the question, and I'm saying that if people were truly exercised about an issue, would you expect more than around 50% of people to have a say on it, to actually go and, I mean, when you consider that this is, like you said, the first action, the first genuine sort of ballot on national strike action that's happened for a long time. You know, in my head, and by the way, I'm generally, personally, and this isn't the views of Teachers Talk Radio, but personally, me, I'm generally in favour, certainly of sort of you know, I'm in favour of strike action in the right situation. Yes,
Yeah.
on a personal level, but my concern is that, you know, even someone who is vaguely generally open to the idea of strike action, if there is an issue that exercises them, surely they would have gone out to vote for it.
No, I take what you're saying. The preliminary ballot, you know, we had two, so there's a preliminary one where you could vote online. That has significantly higher turnout. I think that was in the mid 60s, so higher up from there.
Yeah.
So I would say, although it might sound trivial, like it is still a hurdle to have to do a postal ballot to get your head around it, all that kind of thing. And we have like by-elections with much lower turnout, and we all sort of respect the result of those fine. So I would say that 50% turnout and the postal ballot, particularly the fact you can't just do it from your phone, is really, that's part of anti-trade union legislation, isn't it? It's an attempt to try and introduce another stumbling block to stop people from being able to stand up for themselves. And that's why we got to this point. You know, that's why we're, 23% down from where we were as a profession in 2010. And that's not right.
Yeah, I'll bring Michelle in now. Michelle, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
How are you doing this evening? Are you okay?
Yes, just as you can imagine, as a district secretary, also a teacher and a mum, just absolutely run off my feet.
I can imagine. I mean, what's the sort of reaction amongst your members been to this? Are they all sort of totally on board? Are they, you know, what's the feeling on the ground for you?
Yeah, people are just so pleased that we have passed the ballot threshold, and locally, so I'm one of the joint district secretaries for Wokingham. We've had close to 100 new members join us within the past 2 weeks from other local schools. I think nationally, the NEU has had 18,500 new members join us. So there's huge backing for this, and there's obviously the momentum is there with the new members joining us. We are absolutely gutted for our support staff members who didn't make the ballot threshold in England, and we are getting messages of solidarity from them not being able to go out and strike, but really disappointed that they can't come with us. Locally in our district, Wokingham, we know that over 50% of our support staff members did pass the ballot threshold, but because we didn't pass it in England, they unfortunately can't come out and strike with us. But people are gearing up and ready, and I think, teaching is always sort of viewed itself as quite a middle class professional. We don't, as you said, we're here for the children, and we truly are. But people are contacting us about what to do, what's happening on the day, where are the rallies, what can we come to, what can we help. So yes, people are ready to get the message out there.
Here's an interesting question for you, Michelle, from a listener. And thank you very much, Hannah, for listening and for this question. We were always told, anecdotally, that teachers can only strike for pay and pensions, not other aspects of working conditions. Is this true?
Yeah, so there are, I can't pretend to know the ins and outs of the complex trade union laws, but yes, there are very, very tight, strict guidelines about what you can strike for. So yes, it's around pay terms and conditions. At the moment, obviously, I know lots of people have said, the teaching, they're going with everybody else that's striking. But no, this was a decision from the NEU that was taken at our annual conference, which happens every year. We're a democratic lay-led union. So in April last year, at annual conference, our membership voted to go for indicative ballot, what happened as we came back at the beginning of the year. And it was decided then. And obviously pay is at the forefront. We're seeing the movement of the trade unionism based around pay. So yes, it is very tight, and they do, for us to be a legal, taking legal action, we have to be really careful about what we strike around, and how we follow the government's rules, as I say, including passing those really high thresholds of past 50%.
Okay, I mean, one of the things that I find interesting, and I mentioned this earlier, was that turnout. Why do you think that so many all the unions, have struggled to get the numbers? And also, because a few people actually contacted me anonymously. I know them anonymously. I can't even speak for them. But I have had a few people contact me discussing how they felt, I guess, a bit harangued into voting. Other people have said, well, that's just part of the course. That's that's what you need to do. But we're talking about sort of texts written in quite a, well, I wouldn't go as far as snarky tone, but a bit of a, a bit of a, why haven't you done this for us yet? That sort of thing.
Yeah. So I think I'd sort of like to disagree that we found it really hard to pass the ballot thresholds as at NEU. We're one of the, since the laws have come in about us passing the 50%, it's a really high threshold. And as Alex said earlier, it is designed there to stop us passing, because they know it is high. And as you say, like by-elections, I know, like in our local recent by-elections, only 34% of people voted locally. So we're way past that. I think also a lot of on the ground, we have a lot of our membership is new. As you say, we have a retention crisis in teaching, and we've got a lot of young and new to teaching members. And a lot of people, before I became a teacher and got involved, active in the trade union, there's things that I wouldn't have known. And we've been out on the ground a lot in Wokingham, and, our members are just not aware that, it has to be a postal ballot. We can't go through it like the indicative ballot. We got much higher results in our indicative ballot because it's really easy to get, someone to click online. We're all really busy, click it and it's done, and we think it's done. And lots of people thought that was the real ballot, or they don't understand that it has to be postal. And Rishi Sunak could be elected by the Conservative membership online, but we can't vote to strike online. And we're all busy. It was the lead up to Christmas. I'm guilty of it. I pick up something, comes through the post, I put it in a pile, I put it in my handbag, I'll do that later. And it's a huge administrative tasked to do this. So if you think about all the members that we do have to ballot, making sure that we've got the correct addresses for them, we still have lots of data missing. So, but also at a time that people have changed around schools, so people may have moved over the summer and we don't have the correct address. And you say, you know, we did have a long ballot period because we knew of postal strikes were coming up. But, you know, I think we did an amazing job. I'm so proud of us as a profession for standing up for ourselves and passing that 50% threshold.
How long have you been teaching for, Michelle, as a primary school teacher?
Yeah, so this is my 8th year. I did a
Okay.
career change when I was 30, and this is now my 8th year as a
Okay, and
primary school
how are you finding? What's your sort of temperature gauge on things for you? Is this your hardest time of being a primary school teacher? Is
teacher.
it are there any respects of it where you think, well, actually, this is better than it used to be? Is it
Yeah.
all?
Oh no, gosh! Even in what I consider, you know, a short time teaching, 8 years, the change in teaching is just incredible. You know, I knew, you know, I know some people said, well, I knew what teaching was like when you get into it, but until you're actually through that door, and you know what it's like, yeah, you just don't know. And since starting as a teacher, I've gone on to have 2 children of my own. And I think that's why I care so passionately and a member of the NEU and have got involved with activism, because it's really important to me that we keep good teachers and a predominantly female workforce, that we keep, you know, good female teachers in the job. And I think for me, trying to do this job as a parent and have 2 young children, it's almost impossible. And you can see why we hemorrhage, you know, parents. I'm sure lots of us are aware of that Facebook group that exists, the Teaching Exile group. And, you know, we do it because we love it, but at the same time, as you know, as Alex said earlier, we're also people, and we also have homes and families. And even if we don't have children, there's many of us with caring responsibilities. And you know, I just think about how much time I gave up of myself before that, still too. You know, working evenings, not seeing my friends as much. Everybody is entitled to a life outside of their job. And there is just really not that work-life balance. And
I mean,
lots of
can
people,
you tell me just a snapshot of your routine, your sort of Monday to Friday, your average working day,
yeah.
sort of
So
Monday to Friday? What's your sort
yeah,
of
so I work 4 days a week. So actually, as a district secretary and a branch secretary, I actually get 2 days off. So because the local authority school, so not 2 days off, I should say, 2 days release time to do my trade union work. So
Yeah.
on a Monday and a Tuesday, I will be doing casework that comes in from schools in my district. So helping members that have got issues at their school, going to
Yeah.
grievance meetings, for example. A lot has been around organising meetings around the ballot. Wednesday is my day off, and so Thursdays and Fridays I teach in school. So on a typical day now, my partner takes my children to nursery and school, so he takes those off. So I'm before children. For a teacher, I'm not very good at mornings, but usually I would be there for 8:15. But it starts to slip, and I'm now in foundation stage. So you know I've got everything set up the night before. So Wednesday night it really starts, because I will be opening up my email again, looking for a handover, reading my handover from my job share, reading, you know, safeguarding reports that come in, behaviour reports that come in that we all log online. So Thursday morning I will be in school. My colleague, my job share, would have set up my phonics class for me. So I'll come in, print off anything else that I need, have a catch up with my co-teacher in the other class and the LSAs that we've got. Things will be out in the classroom for the children to do, and I quite like to put yoga on for them in the morning because it's quite comforting. So at 8:40 our children start. I greet them on the door, and 9 o'clock obviously then we start lessons, and then
Yeah.
you know we stop for an hour lunch break. And most teachers know that doesn't really consist of an hour's lunch break, because you're looking after the children, you've got meetings sometimes. And then we go till 3:10.
Yeah.
3:20. So schools are out, and you know at 3:20 you're catching up with your colleagues again, setting up for the next day. We've got, you know, I'm logging again, safeguarding issues,
Yeah.
behaviour issues online. I'm perhaps talking to parents. I'm then planning. I'm printing out pictures that children have done to put on display, put in books, setting up phonics sessions for the next week. So just to give you an example, for the last 2 weeks, I've been, at school by 8:30 each morning, because it's all set at night before. But I'm there till gone 6 o'clock each day.
Yeah.
And on the Friday, I'm writing a handover to my colleague again for Monday of what's happened. So even though I'm only in school 2 days a week, 8:30 till gone 6 o'clock, sometimes even 6:30, that's a longer day. And if I was doing that 4 or 5 days a week, which I used to, it's well over. Plus, again, I hadn't finished. So on Sunday, I'm opening up my laptop again. There was things I didn't get finished to work again then.
Yeah, I mean it's the sort of typical slog. I mean, just before we go to Alex and then obviously to Callum, who's joined us from the NEU, just to mention, this show is sponsored by John Catt. If you're interested in checking out John Catt's latest releases, you can go to johncattbookshop.com. I really recommend, actually, on the pinned tweets in the space, one of them is from Leanne, who has a show tomorrow with Phil Math. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Apologies if it's not. It's called Happiness Factories. I've read the preview of it. It's really, really interesting. So definitely tune in tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. A chat about his book, Happiness Factories, which is all about, what would you say? Making schools happier places. I'll say that. And as I say, it's pinned to this space if you want to sort of find out more about the book. And also about Phil, and maybe join us tomorrow evening for that, 6:30. Just click on ttradio.org and then just click listen live and you can listen to it. Just before I come to Callum, I was going to ask Alex really briefly. Michelle was saying, Alex, that you probably heard her routine. Is yours similar to that? Is yours like the sort of 8 to 6, 8:30 to 6? You need to unmute yourself, bottom left-hand side, if you're still there.
Yeah, kind of similar in terms of overall hours, I guess. I'd say like the days are more unpredictable than that for me. Like sometimes I'd be able to get off a little bit earlier, and then there are other days that I'm still there like till 8, getting through stuff. And yeah, like you say, the weekends as well, there always ends up being something. Probably average of sort of maybe 50 hours a week, sometimes slightly over that. It's got a little bit better as I've sort of got more efficient at doing things. But even like in my school, the marking policy is actually pretty sane. We're not required to do a ridiculous amount of it. But yeah. I find the basic job tends to kind of run to that.
Yeah, and actually the fact that you're out on a school night, Alex, sounds a bit worrying. I'm very worried for you.
Don't worry, I'm all good, son.
That's good. Callum, we'll bring you in now. Good evening to you. How are you doing this evening? Hello.
Hey, Tom. I'm all right. How are you?
Yes, not too bad. Now, do you want to tell everyone, for full disclosure, what your role is?
Yeah. So I started working for the union. I'm not here on behalf of the union. I'm merely a member of staff who wanted to come and speak on the show because it's very important to me. But I've been working for the union since September, specifically for members who are having issues, and we're kind of like the first line of support for members. So, unfortunately, I get to hear day after day mostly the negative experiences of our members across teaching and support staff and lecturers and everybody else within the union. Yeah. So yeah, I've been doing that since September.
Before we get on to the sort of strike itself, because I want to ask you from that sort of insider's point of view on a few things, but before that, there's a tweet here from Mrs. Lloyd, who I think makes a really interesting point. She says, "Do we think that strikes impact the right people? I always worry about annoying parents due to the inconvenience. Should we educate parents more about why we're striking, as I think many see it as the teachers just complaining that they want more money?" What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the term, I can't remember what it was, but whinging parents or unhappy parents, whatever it was. But I think there is a lot of work to be done around educating parents and families around the difficulties that teachers and support staff and schools in general face. I mean, the union have got a number of resources going out to reps across school that, kind of benefit that, different resource booklets, posters, all sorts of different things that can go home to families so they can kind of have a look and understand the situation. I think that's if you look back to the NEU a few years ago when we had the pay campaign around the general election, and it kind of, I can't remember the exact figures, but the swing voters was mostly impacted by the school cuts campaign more than any other. And I think a similar kind of campaign is supposed to bring families on board and support and understand that that their children are going into classes each day with different teachers. Our wonderful support staff are stepping up and taking classes. Our wonderful supply staff are going in different schools each day. Kevin and Mary speak a lot about the lack of teaching the class. Was it 1 in 8 maths classes are taught by maths teachers? Different stats like that that's having a huge impact on the families and their young children, and their education.
Do you think, because I know you joined us a little late, but we've already sort of touched on this.
I've heard most of it, so don't worry. I was listening to it even though I couldn't get in.
Right, okay. Because I was talking about, I was saying that that all unions have struggled to get over the threshold of 50% for the votes. NEU just got there, but the others didn't. Do you think, are you surprised that the NEU and other unions weren't able to get significantly more than 50% if the membership were so exercised on the issue of pay?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that come into it, and then I heard Alex and Michelle speak about different things that were important. I think to kind of focus on the fact that 22,000 members have joined the NEU since last week, since the decision was announced around the strike action. I think, to get 53% and then get an additional 22,000. I don't know the exact numbers, but I think there's round about 500,000, 400,000 teachers in the country. So, 22,000 of those joining purely, you would think, around the strike action is a significant
To be
number.
fair, though, that could be the percentage in NAS who voted for strike action. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
47% or whatever in the NAS. But we've had a few comments on this show, actually, from NAS members saying, I've switched unions, I've gone NEU because of the strike thing.
Yeah.
So many of those might be for that reason. Yeah,
that's a very fair comment. And I think that's what Alex kind of touched on it earlier around the size of the union. So, we've got 23,000 workplaces, up to 400,000 members. Obviously, they're not all teaching staff. And, again, they were touching on the brilliant results of the support staff who just about got there in Wales but didn't quite manage it in England. I think having been part of a bit of the, I suppose, data cleansing, as part of the ballot, the online ballot leading up to that, the amount of contact details that are incorrect, members quit getting in touch with us and they've not got the right house address, they've not got the right email, phone number. Alex touched on the deliberately difficult anti-trade union laws. We had a much better turnout for the online ballot for obvious reasons. It's very easy to click a button on your phone. It's not so easy to have you make your way to a post box, at the end of a busy day, week, month, term.
Yeah, I do get all that. I think I'm just saying that if it was an issue that really exercised people, that they were absolutely... I gave an example of a poll that I put out on my social media the other week, or last week. It had about 7,000 votes. Not scientific, but nevertheless, 7,000 people voted in this thing. And only 5% of people said that their key issue was pay. Their key sort of gripe, if you like, about their role was pay. 5% said that. In fact, I should get the poll up actually on my social so I can actually read out the precise results. But it was about 5% said pay, about 30% said both pay and workload, and then lots of others just put workload. I think it was something like 20-30% said workload. So do you think the strike action mirrors the real issues that teachers are saying they're having? I asked Michelle earlier, I'm not sure she knew the answer, but maybe you do. Is there an issue with teachers going on strike over things that aren't to do with pay and pensions?
Similar to Michelle, I don't know the exact, law and stipulation around being able to go on strike for certain terms and conditions.
Ooh, Callum, I'm just going to interrupt you because I found the results here. Right? I'll read them to you. Poll: if you're considering leaving teaching, is it because of, right? 6,600 voted. Pay, 5.4%. Workload, 52.4%. Both, 30.4%. Something else, 11.9%. Now, my point is that if that is accurate, which I'm not saying it is because it's just a Twitter poll, but let's say there's some accuracy in there, that is a big differential between pay and workload. Almost, that's a huge percentage saying workload over pay. And they haven't clicked both. They've clicked workload instead of pay. So when you read, a lot of things from unions, from media, it's like, this is about pay. Do you think it's a mistake? Do you think that that's why the returns were only on the 50% mark?
I think Alex touched on, there's a number of colleagues across the union that, I suppose, I can't remember how Alex termed it, but teachers do earn a good wage in comparison to some, but at the same time, it's that bigger picture of what, and again, Alex touched on it with the funding and what that actually looks like. Yes, pay is important, but actually it's also around the funding of schools and education and the impact that's having on the profession as a whole, whether it's support staff being made redundant because, schools are having to fund, the pay increase. I think Simon Smith did a really good tweet as a head teacher, kind of his viewpoint. I'm sure I saw it a couple of weeks ago around the impact that the pay increase is having on the school and that their staff. I think being aware that not being able to afford to pay teachers a decent wage means that those teachers that are leaving, we then can't replace them. The impact on supply members not being able to get jobs because schools can't afford to pay the significant charges of private companies that are offering supply staff. The impact on school buildings, the amount of buildings in schools that aren't fit for purpose and schools can't afford to replace those. I think it's all that bigger picture. I definitely speak to more colleagues that suffer with issues around workload and pay. I'm not going to pretend that I don't, speaking to 20 plus members of the union every day, but I think it's that bigger picture that all overlaps, and all comes together, which then means that workload is increased. If you've not got enough members of staff.
Do you want to just outline to us from the NEU's point of view, what do the NEU want? What exactly do they want out of this?
So the line, and this is, Kevin and Mary said from the front, and what members voted for in conference back in Easter was a pay rise that matches or nearly matches inflation. So I think that is what we wanted. We didn't put a specific number on it because it's changing all the time. And that initial conversation around, and there's a lot of talking around nurses, and was it 19%, and that's unmanageable. It's about having that negotiation and that recognition and respect for the profession that we deserve a pay rise. When I say we, I'm not a teacher anymore, but we deserve a pay rise, and we want to get around the table to discuss what that looks like. And then, as part of those discussions, then we can bring in the issues around workload and everything else that, as you quite rightly point out, are equally, if not more important to many members.
What do you think of what Mrs. Lloyd said, who's one of the listeners? And she said, I've said this to you earlier, that this strike might affect parents more than it'll affect Gillian Keegan. That, is it sort of, is it annoying the wrong people, so to speak? I suppose I'm asking you about the effectiveness of strike action. Do you think it's effective as a means of change?
I suppose it depends how much Gillian Keegan and other ministers and MPs around the country care about the constituents, and whether that, the fact that their constituents are unhappy matters to them or not, I suppose, is one answer to that question. If you would hope if an MP has many unhappy constituents that are family members not happy with the state of their schools, the fact that their schools are closed because of strike action, because of the feelings of the staff within the schools, I'm sure Gillian Keegan doesn't really care less, but that's part of the bigger picture of the current government, I suppose, at the moment. But...
I mean, do you have any sort of sympathy for the position of, right, if we give pay rises to everyone who wants a pay rise at the moment, then, I mean, that's discounting the behaviour of politicians, but we'll leave that to one side for a minute. But just in terms of economic policy, I'm talking now. If you were to give pay rises to everyone who wanted one, the economy would be in a mess, because then you'd give pay rises, and then the cost of products would then have to go up again to relate to the pay that everyone was getting. So it's like hyperinflation. It's like inflation, basically. Inflationary policies. Do you sort of sympathise with that, or do you see that as just a fact of how it is now? That's how it is. The wages have to go up, the prices go up. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose depending what side of the fence you're on, there's various different economic.
There are. We don't have to get into the detail on that.
No, and I certainly don't claim to, be aware of what the actual truth is. But I suppose, there's the money, the NEU, and we're saying that there is money available to the government to solve the dispute. There's been lots of money elsewhere to go towards other things. Yes. It can be difficult to offer pay rises to everybody, but actually, if you're working hard day in, day out, doing 60, 70-hour weeks, as Michelle kind of touched on, and Alex, and this is not just an anomaly for certain members that have come in to speak to you. This is everybody, and everybody that we speak to, and the amount of people I speak to that go through their appraisal process and are refused a pay progression at the end of it, and there's not really a reason why. It's just because the school can't afford it. You're going into school 195 days a year, and everything that you do outside those days, of which you're not paid for, strictly speaking, because you are paid to do the 1,265 hours a year, or the 100 across the 195 days. So every piece of work that you do outside those 195 days, you're not actually paid for. And you're going into an appraisal meeting saying you're not allowed to have a pay progression. It's not a race to the bottom. If you're doing that job day in, day out, you deserve a pay rise, as many people in other professions in the private industry do.
I'll come back to you in a second, Callum, because I want to ask Alex and Michelle something. I know Michelle's a primary school teacher. Alex is a history teacher. Alex, if you're there and you're not haven't been swept up in the wind on your rebel Tuesday night out, Monday night out, school night out, you rebel. Alex, are you there?
Yeah, I am, mate.
Yeah. Now, Alex, if you had a choice, right?
Yeah.
And someone said to you, look, because I know what the answer is going to be from some. They'll say, "Oh, we can have both," right? But I'm saying no. I'm saying if you had to choose, right? Because that's the reality. Sometimes you do have to choose. Would you rather have the guarantee of at least one free period or PPA a day, or would you have a significant pay rise?
For me, it would be the workload one. If I had to pick one, and you're right, we don't have to pick one. We can definitely get both of those things. But yeah, if I had to pick one, it'd be workdon't. That's what would make the biggest difference.
No, I disagree with you. I'm not sure the profession can get both of those things. I don't. They're struggling to get one of them. They've struggled forever to get one of them. So
I think that we can. Like on that point about can we afford to give everyone a pay rise? I think it was. Do you know Eddie Dempsey from the RMT?
No, I don't.
So he's their assistant general secretary. Been doing a lot of the media rounds along with Mick Lynch. And his point was the FTSE 300 since the pandemic have increased their wealth by 78%. So they've nearly doubled it. It's not that we lack any wealth in this country. We're one of the richest countries in the whole world. We're actually stuffed with wealth. It's that it's horrendously concentrated at the top. And some of that has got to go to the people that make the world go round. And we are part of that makeup, aren't we? It's perfectly possible to get this. I suppose at the moment, we're in a bit of a catch-22, aren't we? Because at the moment, I suppose it would be difficult to solve the workload issue because of the recruitment and retention crisis, because we actually don't have the manpower to be able to share out the workload more evenly. So you'd sort of have to be able to cover pay to be able to cover workload. Do you see what I mean? We've got to get more people in to be able to actually physically do that.
I think my point was, I'm not saying it isn't possible. Of course, it's possible. I mean, anything's possible. You know, you could spend all your money on Haribo, you know, and everyone could have 50 bags of Haribo every day of the year if we wanted to. So anything's possible. But I'm just saying that practically, based on sort of how things have gone up to this point, I can't suddenly see someone turning around and saying we're going to give everything.
You say, is it feasible that we will actually win it?
Sometimes you have to push one issue, you know, and you have to really push one issue. And all I'm asking is pay the you know, you've just answered the question. I would rather have the guarantee of 1 free period or PPA a day. You get it, guaranteed, at least one, maybe more. You know, you think of other countries around the world, you know, Japan, you know, where the teachers have so much less contact time than teachers in the UK, in England in particular. So I just wonder that, you know, that's why I asked that question. Is and your sort of immediate answer, knee-jerk answer was, yeah, I'd rather have the freeze, because in your head you're going, if you wake up tomorrow and you know you've got an extra free period every day of the week, you don't have any full days teaching anymore. That's a huge mental thing. That would be a huge mental thing. And I guess I'm just asking the question, you know, is the whole conversation is about pay. The whole conversation in the media right now, online, everywhere, it's about pay. No one's talking about the fundamental day-to-day sort of issues in the schools, if you like, that are making people want to leave.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little unfair to say the NEU don't discuss that. I'd say the point that the dispute has been framed in pay terms.
The NEU. I don't know what the NEU discussed because I'm not in the union, and I don't know. I'm not even targeting the NEU here. I'm just saying in general. I'm saying all the unions. I'm just saying, you know, that's what the conversation's about at the moment is pay, and I'm saying, based on everything I read everywhere, that workload is the bigger issue for the majority of teachers. And I'm not sure personally if a pay rise will significantly lead to a significant decrease in workload. That's what I'm asking. Michelle, I'll come to you next. What's your answer to PPA a day or a pay rise if you had to choose? I'm presuming it's going to be pay rise because that's what you're voting for. And
that's what I'm voting. It would be a pay rise, because if I had a pay rise, I tell you what, I would probably be able to reduce my hours to be able to work less. So it would come in. But there is people who, you know, I was lucky. I've sort of, you know, I was able to buy a home at the right time. And if I think about how much house prices have gone up in the area locally, pay is still important. We've got new teachers coming in and they need to be able to have homes and live in the areas that they work in, often expensive areas. So we shouldn't be afraid to say that pay is still important. And I think that's where the media is also missing off that message, that it is pay. And that's where it always makes us look bad, because, you know, pay will, but it's also about funding. Any pay rise that we do get at the moment and deserve to get is unfunded from the government. And, you know, all our schools, we know that they budgeted for an increase in electricity and gas costs, but what we now end up paying, you know, they are also subject to those increased, you know, inflation costs, food inflation costs. So that our schools need that additional funding. And, you know, the NEU are asking for above inflation pay rises that are fully funded. And we cannot, this is why we have to stand up for education, because we cannot let that pay rise be unfunded, because the two are inextricably linked. I know people in your survey have said that workload, but as I say, without less money means less staff, you know, clubs that are gone. We used to have someone that would come. I was in Key Stage 2 before when I joined, and, you know, someone would come in and teach my French lessons for me every week, which was that hour. I had an extra half an hour a week, which wasn't PPA time. I was still in my class while the French teacher was there, but it just made it easier because I didn't have to plan a French lesson. I could maybe do some marking while she was teaching French, and that's the money that's gone. You know, we used to have a teacher that would do cooking with our children, which would every term they would get 2 cooking and an outdoor learning session, which hasn't been replaced since those support staff members have left, which was that extra time for me to do some of other bits of my job again, which is where they all are. And this movement, as you know, is a trade union movement, especially with, you know, with winning this ballot in the NEU, is so much about showing our people power and our power to organise. And I will say that I absolutely understand why workload is such a huge issue for our members, and I know that it is for me. But once we win this, we have our power. We've got that. Mary and Kevin are going in there and having those talks about pay, but they're opening up those conversations about workload too. And you know, if we're prepared to stand up for pay and funding for our schools, we will take the next challenges. And you know, we've talked about our annual conference before, but we're always tackling workload in those conferences too. And I did actually find the legal definition, section 244, about taking trade disputes, and it says there's different ones in there, but the main one I think, you know, we're coming under is that it has to be relates wholly or mainly to terms and conditions of employment, which obviously our pay forms part of that, but it is on the government website, you can find it.
Got you. Just before I ask you and Callum a few more questions, a couple of shouts to everyone listening. Cassie's here. Good evening to you, Cassie. Long time no see. We've got Zoe. We've got lots of new listeners, so thank you very much for spending a bit of time with Teachers Talk Radio this evening. If you want to listen back to any shows that we've had lots and lots. You can follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Follow Teachers Talk Radio. We've got a show a day, new show a day. You can scroll to, if you literally scroll down a list of shows, it's an incredible, diverse list of topics. I know that Hannah was on just before me talking about her experience of dyslexia and teaching, which was fantastic and very, very interesting to listen to. And we've just got a whole range of things happening all the time, so definitely do that. And if you think that you would like to have a go at hosting, then definitely give us a shout as well. Send Teachers Talk Radio a DM and just say, hey, listen, I quite fancy a go at having a go at hosting, and we'll go for that. So definitely get in touch with us. And just the second shout out to John Catt, who support this show and all our shows, which is incredibly fantastic of them. And I'd just like to give them a shout out. And you can find out more about John Catt in the pinned tweet at the top of the space. There's a book that Phil Math, I think that's how you pronounce his name, but apologies if it's not, has out at the moment, called Happiness Factories, a success-driven approach to holistic physical education. And it's really interesting. It's about PE at a whole school level and how that can impact the well-being of all students. So definitely check that out. Tomorrow, 6:30 p.m, Leanne is talking to Phil about that book. Michelle, just to ask you before I go back to Callum again, this is an article that was written by somebody called Christina Merkett for the New Statesman. She's a teacher, an English teacher, and her final paragraph, I'm not going to spend too long on this because we've already saw. I think it's very interesting discussion about the purpose of strike action, how successful it can be, reaching the thresholds. I think it's very interesting, but I don't want to spend the whole time on that. But her final paragraph was, while pay may give teaching a temporary boost, it won't lighten the workload or remove the bureaucracy or relieve the stresses of working in a state sector that is obsessed with exams, and yet a third of pupils don't pass GCSE English and maths. Working conditions, not pay, are the reasons teachers leave. Until we tackle this, schools will, to use a classic teacher phrase, never make the progress they are clearly capable of. Most of the public seem to be in favour of teacher strikes. Do you think, though, that the teachers' strike will have a positive or negative net impact in terms of society's view of teachers, which has always been, well, you don't have to spend long on social media to see some of the sort of, some of the comments that can go on. I mean, do you think that strikes are... Yeah, I mean, what do you think?
I mean, strikes are designed to be disruptive. There is no way getting around that. And, my own daughter has started school this year. And, of course, it's on the parents' WhatsApp group. And I'm like, disclaimer, just to say I am, the NEU district secretary and coordinating strike action locally. But yeah, I mean, obviously, we're looking at the statistics coming out in the Mirror. 70%, over 70% were for teachers. I know the YouGov one was 51%, which is actually higher than it's ever been at our last strike in 2016. It was around 30% for teachers.
Yeah,
and I think, yes, I know it does upset parents, and others people have commented, but our leverage, it might not upset our education secretary so much, but our leverage is against the economy, I think, which as a member from ASLEF said, because I think genuinely feel this is the ballot that the government have been most scared of. They didn't enter into negotiations with all the unions until last week because they knew our results were coming out, and we are the biggest ballot that's taken place. And for them, I think the power to slow down the economy on the day that teachers take strike, if we're closing down schools, is huge. And if we don't want to go out to strike for 4 days, none of us want to lose 4 days' wages. But if we have a big impact, it may not go to 4 days, 4 day strike. Am I, hopeful that will happen? Yes. Am I realistic about the Tory government? Also, yes. But, they have started, Mary has been in there for meetings with them now. So I don't think it's going to damage us. We're part of, as I say, the wider trade union movement that is going on at the moment. And, as I said, there's materials out there to get parents on side. We have to own our own narrative as teachers and education staff and support staff about why we're doing this and why we're going on strike. And as always, it is always there for the children. And there's that brilliant tweet going around, isn't there, when people say, oh, that's a strike day, how it's damaging education. And I think they've got the picture, haven't they, of something from Little Mermaid, where actually what education funding is really like. And it just
sorry,
cannot
Tom,
go on.
Can I just jump in there?
Yeah,
that's my tweet.
Oh, is it? Oh, brilliant. Sorry, yeah. Yes,
all right, Nathan.
Right. Yeah, I love that
First thing you hear from him, he's like, I made the meme.
I made that.
It's my meme. Mine, all mine.
No, it wasn't me.
Yeah, it perfectly illustrates of what we know the reality is. Even before COVID, we knew it was really dire, and it's just got even worse. And our children deserve better. This is not the education system I want my children to go through. I want my children, when they go to secondary schools, to be able to be taught maths by a maths teacher. I want things like forest learning to be going on, and all that enrichment, and what they need after going through COVID. And it's all the underfunding of the NHS, which we know how long our support our waiting list are for a CAMHS referral to get children diagnosed with autism. It's just not good enough.
Oh, goodness me, yeah. I mean, I've just literally spent the last 2 minutes trying to find this thing that Nathan apparently did. And
I think he's popped it on there.
I can't find it because there's literally about 50 selfies on his timeline before you even get to any relevant information.
I've pinned it now to the top of the space.
Oh, okay. We can all look at it. The striking current will harm education funding.
No,
current funding. Current funding on the right, and that on the left.
It hasn't worked in that format. No, it hasn't worked. But you know what? It was my proudest moment.
It, mate. You're very good. You're very, very good, and you deserve recognition for that. Yeah, we'll make sure it gets put on your plaque above the door.
Thank you.
That you created that post.
Literally, I've just had it. Someone mentioned something that I did. I had to jump in. Sorry,
it just made me laugh that you were like that kid in class who's like, I did it. Like the hand pops up. It was me.
Sorry.
It was me. Brilliant.
I'll leave again.
Anyway, Callum, do you think that there will be more strike action in the next 12 to 24 months from teachers? Do you think that, for example, other unions will reballot and so on?
I mean, there has been talk of an AHT rebalancing, hasn't there? And NAS, I think we're exploring it. I mean, I suppose the outcome of this series of strike action will have influence on that. Likewise, what members want to take forward into next year. I mean, we've already touched on the annual conferences where decisions are made and what. And I kind of put a tweet in response, to this as well. Around at the end of the day, if we want to challenge workload, if that's the main issue, then members have to kind of do something about it. And I say that flippantly, and again, recognising what every member of staff is going through in schools and the workload. And we've had discussions online for years around the importance of unions and who leads unions. It's not Kevin and Mary at the front. Yes, they're the face of the union. They're talking on the TV and the radio, but actually the decisions are made by the members, and it's about us being active and loud and talking about the issues. If it's significant enough to have an impact on our lives and our well-being, then we need to step forward and come together and collectivise and challenge in workplaces, which then challenges across districts, which then challenges across the whole regions, and then that becomes a national challenge. It's not by the odd vocal person saying it's not fair, and somebody big on Twitter saying it's not fair. It's about the 400,000 members or 400,000 teachers and support staff across the country making their point heard, which is sort of answers the question that
Yeah.
And I think the benefit, if that's the right word, of the current time is obviously the education was the last profession almost to get on board with the strike action. Many other, the NHS and barristers, firefighters, NHS, everybody was already kind of called for strike action, train staff. And this has almost kind of come by accident. It wasn't going to be a particular focus, I don't think, of the union, if I'm honest. And then it's kind of come, momentum from everybody else. So I suppose there were other more pressing issues, and it's kind of just come from the momentum of everybody else, I think, as well.
When you say the momentum of everyone else, what do you sort of mean by that?
So the national picture at the moment of just the amount of strike action that's been taking place across all professions.
Yeah.
Obviously, there was the national march back in summer of last year. I can't remember when it was, and it's just kind of built from that position. And actually, whereas we had ballots, I think it was about January of last year, indicative ballots online, and there was a very poor turnout. It was, I think, 20-30%, something like that. Obviously, it's grown significantly over time, but it's that momentum really from everywhere else that's allowed us to get to this point. I think this time last year it might have been a very different picture.
Yeah. I'm gonna again put a shout out to everyone if they want to call in. If you've got an opinion on this strike action, do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? Do you agree with it but think you'd like a different focus? Do you think that it can be successful? What is your version of success? If you have an answer to any of those questions, or you have an opinion, we want to hear from you. You can click the little icon in the bottom left hand side, request to speak at any point. We've got about 15 minutes left, so if you want to sort of share your piece, then definitely click the button and get involved in the conversation. Michelle and Callum, I've got an interesting question for you next, which neither of you are going to be able to swing. All right. So you'll try. You'll both try desperately to swing it, but we'll see how we go. You have the election coming up within the NEU, don't you, for a new president, El Presidente. The battle, as far as I'm aware, correct me if I'm wrong, is between two candidates, which is Niamh Sweeney, who was actually on Teachers Talk Radio on Saturday with Callum, who was interviewing her on Saturday. So you can listen back to that on the website. And the other candidate, I believe, is Daniel Kabede. I think that's how you pronounce his name, but please correct me if I'm wrong on that. Kabede, sorry, thank you. So there's two candidates. Michelle, who are you voting for and why?
Obviously, I'm speaking as an individual,
personal capacity.
Personal capacity. Yes, sorry, rather than on behalf of my district.
Yeah.
Because we had hustings for both members, so we both sat and listened to them.
Yeah. And
unfortunately, we didn't make quorum in Wokingham to nominate a candidate. But personally,
what does that mean?
So we're a lay-led democratic union. If we're going to back a candidate, we need to have quorum at our meetings, so we have to give certain amount of time to all our members to know that we are holding a hustings, give them advance notice, and then we have to have at least 10 members at that meeting to make a democratic decision. Anything under 10, we can't make any decisions in our district.
Got you. So what's your personal view then?
My personal one is I would probably vote for Daniel. I've read what you put online. I've listened to Neve. Personally, I think we should have two. Just if I'm really honest, I think we should have two. It's worked well
that's
with
a cop out. No.
Well, I would, if I had to choose, I would choose Daniel. But I personally feel they're very different, and it would be good to have two. I think it's really important. Sometimes, I'm a job share in my teaching role and in the district secretary role, and it works really well. I think job shares are brilliant. We should have more in teaching.
Can I ask? Because I listened to the show on Saturday. That's the first time I've heard Neve. I'm not a member of the NEU, etc., etc. Right? Can I ask why Daniel is your sort of preferred candidate?
So when I joined became sort of active in the union, Daniel and I do come from an NUT background.
Okay.
So my first, for example, annual conference was the NUT one, the last NUT one. Daniel's passion for education has always stood out. I know what you said earlier about the Ukraine war, but I've watched him speak, and as I say, we are a lay-led union, and I think it's really important, and a lot of members still don't understand that. As Kat said earlier, like, our voice is us, and we are the organisers, and we have the power to make change together. And you just listen to Daniel speak and you feel that, and you feel empowered and impassioned, and you remember why you got into education and why you care. And he has a big personality.
You mentioned my sort of tweet earlier that I did. I'm not going to ignore it because I think it's relevant to the discussion. If you're saying you'd vote for him, he did say, for anyone listening to this as a podcast, you won't be able to see what he said, but he said, NEU extends solidarity to the people of Ukraine. NEU extends solidarity with the people of Ukraine. When diplomacy fails and military action is used to resolve disputes, ordinary citizens are the ones who pay the price. The NEU stands in solidarity with the citizens of Ukraine, with teachers, with school students, and with their families who will today be fearing for their lives and for the future of their country. The NEU adds its voice to those calling on President Putin to end attacks on Ukrainian territory and to order Russian troops to leave. We further call on all parties, so Ukraine and Russia, to honour their obligations under the Minsk II agreement and under international law. The conflict between Russia and the Ukraine must not lead to the expansion and consolidation of military alliances, i.e. NATO, in Europe, which can only threaten future stability for all and hasten the likelihood of further conflicts and wars. So, to me, that obviously he sort of afterwards sort of tried to, I guess, I don't know what he said afterwards, but that was a very, very incendiary statement that was made. Very controversial. This is again my complete personal view on it. I really strongly disagree with it. Do you think that sort of thing isn't relevant in this election?
At the first bit, he's talking on behalf of the NEU, isn't he? The first 4 paragraphs, he's saying that. I think the last 2 paragraphs, he's talking from his own personal opinion. He hasn't used NEU in those. Should the 2 have gone together? Maybe not, but he made a mistake and he owned it. We're all going to make mistakes along the way. I don't think he shied away from it. He listened.
But do you actually agree with what he said, but you just disagree with posting it?
Personally, I don't think there's anything wrong in his last paragraph. Peaceful dialogue based on a commitment to finding a solution. I'm anti-war. Absolutely. That's my personal stance. Nothing to do with my teaching or at all. But there should be peaceful dialogue. Why would you not call for peaceful dialogue?
There should be peaceful dialogue, but I think the point there is that Ukraine was invaded by a country, and there wasn't really space for let's sit around a table and have a peaceful dialogue at that. But I mean, this was posted in March. They've just been invaded, and obviously in that situation, you can't really talk to a tank, So I think that was sort of the reason it seemed very sort of sitting on the fence about who was actually to blame for the situation. Now, I don't want to get too much into politics.
Ukraine was invaded. It has a right to defend itself. My heritage from a country. My heritage is from a country that was invaded by Britain. We had a right to defend ourselves. That's not what I'm saying, at all. But I do believe in peace with that. And yeah, I think it's hard without talking to Daniel. It's hard to know what his intention is, and that's maybe we can't. That's not what I take from it.
We would look, as a sort of, I would love Daniel to, come on Teachers Talk Radio. I know he's been invited to sort of have the discussion and and actually have an open dialogue about it. Because up to now I haven't really, seen or heard anything on that. But anyway. That's great to hear who you'd vote for. Callum, you're not allowed to sit on the fence on this either, obviously, because Michelle didn't. So, a bonus points for Michelle there. But Callum, who would you vote for in this election? Who are you going to vote for?
I'm very lucky to say that both Niamh and Daniel are friends of mine and had the pleasure of being able to work with them over the last 10 years. And I absolutely 100% get to sit on the fence because as a paid member of staff of the union, I am not allowed to share thoughts any way, shape or form. So congratulations to them both for getting to this point, and I wish them all the luck in the world going forward, is my sitting on the fence answer.
Oh, God. Right. Well, thanks for that, Callum. You failed. Michelle at least gave a straight ballpoint answer there. That was good. Brent, I know you're involved in the union. Who are you voting for?
You'd find this ironic. I've literally reached out to Daniel's people and was speaking to some of them at the weekend at my regional conference, and they're happy for him to actually come on to Teachers Talk Radio, most likely at a recorded interview or speaking to myself next Sunday. So there you go. You got your wish, Tom.
Oh my goodness! Well, you better let us know, Brent.
Well, he's got to say yes yet, so he's got to say yes either to an interview.
Well, I hope he says yes, and we can. Well, but I do hope you're going to read that statement out to him, Brent. I do hope you're going to read his statement out so he can have his view on it.
Well, as an historian, yeah, I'm fascinated by that too as well. But I'd like to reiterate what was said as well. I find it deeply ironic as an Irishman that people in Britain are supporting what's going on with Ukraine defending itself when, I think there's a lot of historical narratives there, Tom. I think it's very interesting. I'd like to see peaceful dialogue. I get worried when we arm countries. We've been there before with the Mujahideen in the 1980s. Do I trust Vladimir Zelensky completely? I have to be honest with you. I have my reservations, but do not get me wrong. I stand with Ukraine. I think what the Russians have done is wrong. But as often happens, Tom, this as an historian, there's always two sides to a story. There's always a narrative. And as I was looking recently, because I teach this at GCSE, I look at the 9/11, look at the war on terror. We kind of took our eye off the Putin ball for a while and let him do a lot of things in Chechnya, and then it was too late. So I think Daniel probably shouldn't have had those comments at that time because obviously people are a bit raw. But I think in hindsight, we'll look back at maybe 20 or 30 years' time, we get our hands on all those papers and all the clandestine services, and we have the bigger picture what's going on. We'll be able to make a better judgment. But yeah, there's no doubt about it. The people of Ukraine deserve to be, supported by us. And I think it's absolutely morally wrong when countries invade other countries. But I feel that way as someone whose ancestors I've traced to being basically sold into slavery by Oliver Cromwell. So, yeah, that's my take on that,
any country in the world has things it's done that would be wrong or debatable. I think I would rather not do a, I think we're looking at one particular issue and what the future president of the NEU said.
Agree.
And that's what I'm focusing on. I don't, we can literally talk about the history of 300 countries in the world and all the different bad things they've done, because there's no country in the world who is, that's perfect and that is done, absolutely not. Of course not. But on
Liechtenstein.
Yeah, probably. But on this particular, I think that caused some consternation, let's say.
I think a bit of an own goal.
It certainly did for me anyway, because I saw that as a statement that was quite incendiary, was appeasing what had happened and not recognising that a country had been invaded by another country, and that sometimes there is a wrong and a right. You know, that sometimes there just is. You know, in particular, it's not a case of, well, you know, this and this, and we don't trust this guy, and this is this, and that's that. No, there isn't that. It's just this country's been invaded, and that's sort of my position, not the position of Teachers Talk Radio. That's Tom Rogers' personal position on this, and I'm very interested to hear. I'd love to hear an interview with him to sort of explain what he meant by that, or what his thoughts on that are. Whether
I would pose the question, Tom. I would honestly put, because as a union representative, I would want. I mean, Kevin and Mary are absolutely fantastic, and actually, it was a good point that was raised that maybe I would like two leaders of the union, because throughout the COVID crisis, Kevin and Mary, I think that's one of the reasons we carried over the line and we got the vote, is because there's an element of trust with those two. They are very good with the media. They are very hard to pin the kind of militant, the red sort of cloak over those two. They're very, very well spoken. They're very articulate, and I think they've led the union quite admirably. And I think I personally would like to see the two stay on, because I think that what they've done is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I was only joking about not potentially having two people in charge. I've literally no idea what the best thing is, and I've got no vested interest in it either as not a member. But it sounds interesting anyway, the sort of debate around that. Listen, we're quickly running out of time. We've got a few minutes left. Paul, I've asked Paul to call in as an NAS member, just to share, maybe to finish off, your thoughts, Paul, on this whole matter of teacher strikes and what your position is.
Yeah, I'm frustrated because I voted to strike, but we didn't obviously get the threshold. And I wondered about changing unions or also joining the NEU, so then I can strike as well, because I think it needs to be done. I had a couple of questions, if you don't mind. First one might sound a bit daft, but I just don't know the answer. In terms of it saying action short of a strike, what does that actually mean?
Well, Callum would probably be a good one to answer that from an NEU perspective. I mean, my experience of that is that means you don't go to any meetings. That means you do the minimum required.
Just work through.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it's built. And I've done that before. You know, I remember back in 2000 and God, we must be going back now to 2009, maybe. I think it was ages ago.
The last strike, I remember. I'd only been in teaching a couple of years.
Yeah.
And obviously, we did actually strike. If it's working to rule, then fair enough. But I do support it. But I think the people who need to support it more than the rest of us are head teachers. Because I do remember actually the head teacher that I had going back over a decade actually supported us striking. He said, no, you should strike. And I think there was 3 of the staff who were actually the people striking, but he still closed the school, if anything, in solidarity. So I wonder what the chances are of the NAHT reballoting and actually supporting schools and closing them.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we've run out of time, but this one could go on for about 4 shows. You know what I mean? There's just so much to discuss. I just want to say a massive thank you to Callum. I want to say a massive thank you, particularly to Michelle and to Callum, for giving up their time to come on this evening. Thanks to Brent. I know earlier on we had who else was here earlier on? Somebody else was as well. You know what? It's been that much interesting discussion. I got lost in it all. But I just want to say a massive thanks to everybody for speaking, for engaging, for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it and got some interest out of it. Michelle, do you have any final sort of words on anything?
Yep. See you all on the 1st of February at the local rallies. Look forward to seeing the tweets of your pictures. We will be in Wokingham. So any Wokingham teachers, please do come and join us at 11 and see you there.
On the picket line.
That's it. Keep fighting the good fight.
And Callum, any sort of final thoughts from you?
Very similar. If anybody who's in the Doncaster area on the 1st of February and beyond, I'll be on a picket line. And Paul, we hope you do come and join us at the NEU. You're very much welcome.
There he is. Transfer deadline day, poaching him. Brilliant.
No poaching allowed.
Absolutely. Right. Thanks, everybody. And we're going to be live in about 1 minute with Tracy. So if you want to listen to that, it's ttradio.org. Click listen live. Tracy's on in about a minute's time. Thanks, everyone. And we will be back with you very soon.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.